Good morning. So today we have our lesson on chapter 0, lesson 3, and we are going to be working with decimals and our different operations. So the first thing we'll look at is adding and subtracting decimals. And our first example here is we're going to look at what happens when we add decimals. And a rule is when we add or subtract decimals is that we need to rewrite the problem going up and down, and we need to line up the decimal points. So for example, if I'm going to do this first problem, 14.26 plus 1.0931, I need to rewrite it up and down and line up my decimal points. So I'm going to write 14.26 plus 1 point, and if you'll notice right here, I have lined up my decimal points, right? They're right on top of each other. 0.0931. And then remember, we're going to start adding from the right-hand side. So we're going to start adding over here. And then since there's nothing to add to my 1, I can add in these zeros if it helps me. And then I'm just going to add normally. 0 plus 1 is 1. 0 plus 3 is 3. 6 plus 9 is 15. Carry my 1. 3, bring my decimal point down right there, 5 and 1. So my final answer would be 15.3531. When I subtract, I'm going to do the same thing. But if we notice here in the 71, there's no decimal point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a decimal point right here at the end of it. And then I'm going to subtract 5.73. Now when we subtract, it's really, really important that we add in any of these zeros that we need, because what happens is, since I can't subtract 3 from 0 here, right, there's nothing to I don't have anything here, so I'm going to have to borrow. But I don't have anything to borrow from here. I'm going to have to borrow all the way over here from this 1. So I'm going to borrow 1, I'm going to make him a 0, and I'm going to give him 10, right? But then I'm going to borrow 1 from him and make him 9. And now this becomes a 10. And now I'm ready to subtract. 10 minus 3 is 7. 9 minus 7 is 2. Bring down my decimal point. Now I run into another problem. 5, and I'm trying to take 5 away from 0, and I can't. So I borrow 1 from the 7. Make this a 10 now. 10 minus 5 is 5. And 6 minus 0 is 6. And my final answer would be 65.27. So remember, my rule for adding and subtracting decimals is I have to line up the decimal point. Move on to multiplying decimals. Multiplying decimals is pretty easy. My rule is that I multiply normally, and then I count the numbers to the right of the decimal point, and that's how many numbers in my answer go to the right of the decimal point. So let's do an example, and it will probably make a little bit more sense. 32.5 times 3.1. In this case, my decimal points line up. That's fine, but they don't need to. I'm going to multiply normally. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. Fill in my 0. 3 times 5 is 15. Carry my 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 3 times 3 is 9. I'm going to add 5, 7, 10. Carry my 1, 10. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up here in my problem, and I have a 5 and a 1 that are to the right of the decimal point. That's 2 different digits. I'm going to go down here to my answer, 1, 2 digits, and that's where my decimal point goes, and my answer is 100.75. Let's do one more example. 8.42 times 2.7. If you'll notice here, my decimals don't line up. It's fine. Don't worry about it. 7 times 2 is 14. Carry my 1. 7 times 4, 28. Plus 1 is 29. Carry my 2. 7 times 8 is 56. Plus 2 is 58. I'm going to get rid of those. Bring down a 0. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 8 is 16. And I'm going to add 4, 3, carry the 1, 7, carry the 1, 2, carry the 1, 2. All right, I'm going to look up here in my problem, and I notice I have 1, 2, 3 numbers to the right. So I'm going to go down here to my answer. 1, 2, 3 numbers. and there's my decimal point. My answer is 22.734. Dividing is a little bit different. It's important that we remember what a dividend and what a divisor are. So our dividend is this number right here that we are dividing up into the pieces. So 73.2 and 75 would be our dividends. It's the number that we are dividing up. Our divisor is this number that we're dividing by. So what are the groups we want to put it in? So dividend and divisor. Now, a rule for dividing decimals is that our divisor, this number right here that's going to go on the outside of the division house, this divisor cannot have a decimal point. The problem is they both do. So what are we going to do? We're going to rewrite our problem. 73.32. We just said this number right here, this divisor, cannot have a decimal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply it by 10. And I'm going to move that decimal point here and it becomes a 6. But if I do that, I must multiply my dividend by 10 as well. And I'm going to move it right here so that I move it to the right one. So basically my new problem, you don't have to rewrite it, but my new problem is basically 6 into 733.2. So now I'm going to divide. It goes in here once. 6, subtract. 13, 2, 12, 1. 13, 2, 12, 1, 2. And my decimal point goes straight up. So my answer is 122.2. Okay, let's do one more. I have 75 divided by 1.5. No decimal here in my divisor. I'm going to move it over all the way to the right. Both of my examples, I only had to move it one place. Sometimes you might have to move it two. And I do the same thing over here in my dividend. Even though there's no decimal, there really is right here. So I move it over one place, which means I must fill in a 0 here. So now I'm going to say, how many times does 15 go into 75? It goes in there 5 times. 5, 75, 0, bring down a 0. Don't forget, 15 goes into 0 0 times. And my answer is 50.